on this, especially a hearing that's happening tomorrow. My name is Paco Fabian. I work at Our Revolution. And,
why do you think grown men in powerful positions are so afraid of you?
I guess they must feel like their worldview or their interests or whatever it is threatened by us, and that we should take as a compliment that people want to silence us. We become too loud.
Greenpeace, the Sunrise Movement. As you can see, this is a big movement, and we're ready to make sure that we're not using our taxpayer dollars anymore to poison our communities, to hurt the environment, and to hurt the health.
What do we do in the water we drink?
Workers, of our children, groups like
very overwhelmed and super grateful for all the wonderful people.
Oxfam and PDA, Progressive Democrats of America, as well as the Stop the Money Pipeline
to all the
Coalition.
politicians around the world
We're all gathered
insane.
here together to start looking at ending fossil fuel subsidies. And so, as many of you know, fossil fuel subsidies are one way that we can really start to address.
Why do you think grown men in powerful positions are so afraid of you?
I guess they must feel like their worldview or their interests or whatever it is threatened by us, and that we should take as a compliment that people want to silence us. We become too loud for
but a lot of these are
to handle.
tax-based subsidies, which means it's in the purview of Congress. And so the first step in that is a hearing that's going to be taking place tomorrow at 10 a.m. In the Oversight and Environmental Subcommittee, which is chaired by Representative Khanna, who's our first speaker
super
tonight.
Grateful for all the wonderful
It's
people.
not night yet, although it's a little dark here in my basement.
My
So
message
Representative
to
Khanna,
all the
take it away,
politicians
please.
around the world is
Thank you,
is
Paco.
insane.
Thank you for your leadership, for our revolution's leadership, Danny Leonard at Greenpeace, and all of the groups. Thank you to Katie Thomas on my team and so many of the activists. We have
Why do you think grown men in powerful positions are so afraid of you?
Have been in the
I
tax
guess they
code for
must
100
feel
years.
like their
we finally have an
worldview or their
opportunity
interests
to
or
remove
whatever it
them,
is
to remove the unfair
threatened by us,
subsidies that
and that
have
we should take as a
fueled the
compliment
fossil fuel
that
industry
people want
for
to silence
almost
us.
a century.
We become too
We're going
loud
to demand
for
that
people
5
to
specific
handle.
subsidies will be removed from the tax code. The president ran on this. It's part of his infrastructure bill. We need to now deliver. They should not be able to have tax deductions for intangible costs with billing. They shouldn't be able to deduct the expenses that they
Very
have with foreign
overwhelmed and
governments
super
before
grateful for
getting
all the
fossil
wonderful
fuel
people.
into this country. They shouldn't be able to have MLPs
My message
and high
to all the
costs
politicians
and hide
around the world is
their
insane.
profits through those kind of tax holdings. They should not be able to have accounting practices
Listen
that allow them
to the
to
science
avoid
and act
the
on the
proper
science.
amount of tax that they
Why
owe.
do you
We
think
have to
grown men
make
in
our
powerful
code
positions
fair.
are so afraid of
This is
you?
a must-have.
I guess they
This
they
is
must
ground
feel
zero
like
for the
their
environmental
worldview
movement.
or their
We're not
interests
even
or
saying
whatever it
spend
is
the money
threatened
on
by
renewable
us,
energy, which we
and
have
that
to, and our
we should
smart
take
grid,
as a
which we have to, and
compliment
electric vehicles,
that
which we
people
have,
want
we
to
have
silence us.
We're
We become
just
too
saying,
loud
stop
for
putting
people
the
to
thumb on the
handle.
scale for the fossil fuel industry. Create a level playing field. How in the world with climate change can you justify subsidizing, giving a leg up, artificially helping the fossil fuel industry, when we ought to be doing the exact opposite? Tomorrow,
Very overwhelmed
we're gonna hear from
and
Greta
super
Thunberg.
grateful
We're gonna
for
hear
all
from
the
some of
wonderful
the
people.
experts. I know many of you are going to be live streaming the event.
My message
and we're going
to
to
all the
end with a
politicians around the
united
world
demand,
is
hopefully from the
insane.
progressive movement, loud and clear. This is ground zero. This is our first priority. Remove
Listen
these fossil fuel
to the
subsidies.
science.
Let's do this
Act on the
in a way we
science.
haven't done for 100 years. And this
Why
must
do you
pass
think grown men in
reconciliation
powerful
as
positions
part of the
are
next
so afraid of
infrastructure
you?
bill. That
I
is
guess
the purpose
they
of tomorrow's
must
hearing,
feel like
and I
their
appreciate all
worldview
of
or
the
their
groups,
interests
all
or
of the
whatever it
activism
is
to
threatened
unify
by us,
the
and
environmental
that we should
movement
take as a
tomorrow. So on
compliment
Earth Day, this
that
message
people
can
want
be heard
to
loud
silence
and
us.
clear.
We become
Thank you
too
so much,
loud
Paco.
for people
Thank you,
to handle.
Representative Khanna. Appreciate your leadership on this, and it's great that we're taking the first steps in Congress to try to address this issue. We were going to be joined by Representative Ilhan Omar. Unfortunately, she might be able to join us a little bit later. She was going to be our second speaker, but she's one of the co-sponsors.
Very overwhelmed and super grateful for all the wonderful people
in Congress, which includes ending fossil fuel subsidies. So we're super excited
My message
about that.
to all the politicians around the world is saying,
making sure everybody watches and shares the live stream from the committee, the subcommittee tomorrow. It'll be on the Committee on Oversight YouTube page.
Act on the
and also call your members of Congress, tell them to
Why do you think grown men empower
Polluter Welfare Act, as well as call them and tell them to support ending fossil fuel subsidies and the report that will be coming out of the subcommittee tomorrow. So I'm going to turn it over now to Zanagee Artis, who is with 0 Hour. Zanagee, how you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Congressman Khanna for all the work that he's done in support of the environmental justice movement. Definitely tune in to that hearing tomorrow, because it's going to be really important. But 0 Hour is a global youth-led climate justice organization based in the United States. And today I'm speaking on our behalf and on behalf of young people demanding action on climate change around the world. And today is about subsidies. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to convince you why we need to end all fossil fuel subsidies. In 2017, an article came out on the effects of fossil fuel subsidies on United States crude oil production by Peter Erickson et al. And it found that, quote, at recent US oil prices of $50 per barrel, tax preferences and other subsidies push nearly half of new, yet to be developed oil into profitability. And that this potentially increases US oil production by almost 17 billion barrels over the next few decades, equivalent to 6 billion tons of carbon dioxide. We are out of time to transition off of fossil fuels, and yet our government is actively making the industry profitable. Yesterday was the 11th anniversary of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The worst oil spill in American history, but certainly not the last. You know that, I know that, the United States Congress knows that, and President Biden knows that. We know that as long as we have pipelines, as long as we have drilling and fracking, we will have environmental racism, environmental destruction, and rampant climate change. And the fossil fuel industry knows it too. They've known about climate change since long before I was born. Exxon knew of the severe risks posed by climate change as early as 1968. I was born on November 11th, 1999. And for the 21 years that I've been alive, there has not been a moment in which the federal government has not given handouts paid for by the American taxpayers to the fossil fuel industry. The same industry polluting the air that is choking Black and Indigenous communities who live in the most polluted zip codes in the nation. The same industry that is the reason why we have a cancer alley along the Mississippi River. The United States government has been complicit in the fossil fuel industry's poisoning of our people. And that should make you angry. That should make you pick up the phone and call your elected officials, because enough is enough and we can do better. Call your elected officials and tell them to co-sponsor the End Oil and Gas Tax Subsidies Act, introduced by Representative Earl Blumenauer of Oregon. Call your elected officials and tell them to co-sponsor the End Polluter Welfare Act, introduced last week by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. Call your elected officials and demand that they fight for the elimination of all fossil fuel subsidies in the infrastructure package that will carry out President Biden's Build Back Better plan. We won the House of Representatives, we won the United States Senate, and we won the White House. This is our moment. This is not the time for incremental change. This is 0 hour to act on climate change, on climate justice. So pick up the phone and join this movement. And for everyone who doubts our ability to transition to a 100% renewable energy economy, for the people who say there isn't enough money for an infrastructure change to that scale, tell them that every year fossil fuel subsidies cost the American people billions. So when they say we can't achieve a Green New Deal, that we can't achieve a renewable energy economy, tell them, yes, we can. The money is there and it's going to the fossil fuel industry. We don't owe the fossil fuel industry one more dollar, not one, because the fossil fuel industry has funded climate denialism and entrenched this country in toxic energy for decades. So call your representatives. Let's put an end to fossil fuel subsidies. Thank you for your time. And thank you, Congressman Khanna, for all the work that you do. And I hope everyone tunes in to the hearing tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you, Zanagee. Really appreciate it. Very well said. We need to take action, and there's no better time than now, right? We have a very short window, as Representative Khanna mentioned, in the next infrastructure bill to get this done. We only need 51 votes to do it through budget reconciliation, so let's see if we can get it done. So next, we're going to hear from Kaylee Shoup. Kaylee is based in New Mexico, and she works for Citizens Caring for the Future. And she's going to tell us a little bit about how these subsidies are actually affecting people on the ground in the Permian Basin. Kaylee, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Kaylee Shoup, and I am so humbled and grateful to be speaking today. I was born, raised, and currently live in a small town called Carlsbad, New Mexico. Carlsbad, for those who don't know, is located in the Permian Basin, which in 2019 was considered the world's top oil producing region. It is quite an experience living in a place such as the Permian, and it is even more jarring when a small oil field town just so happens to be the community that you grew up in. I am currently an organizer for Citizens Caring for the Future, which is a group of concerned citizens in Southeast New Mexico advocating for the protection of our environment. Because of the hostility in Carlsbad, I had lost my sense of community, and Citizens Caring for the Future in no small part changed my life by giving me that sense of community back and by giving me the opportunity to use my voice in meaningful ways. The political climate in the Permian makes it downright scary to speak out against the industry, and there are often social consequences, if not worse consequences. I am extremely privileged to not have to worry about losing my job or income if I speak out, and I know that most don't have that same luxury. I left Carlsbad after high school and returned in 2018, just as oil and gas production was reaching a peak. My hometown was a brand new and unpleasant place to be when I got back. With a booming oil industry comes a huge influx of workers and families, and the infrastructure to support such population growth simply didn't exist. And it was very obvious in day-to-day life. It is not an exaggeration to say that Carlsbad was experiencing a housing crisis as we were economically booming. In fact, the crisis was caused by the boom. As soon as desperately needed new apartments or housing would go up, the whole complex would be rented for an exorbitant amount by a major player like Chevron. Anyone that worked outside of oil couldn't find affordable housing. My father sits on the school board, and for 2 years, they struggled to find a single teacher to hire because no one could find or afford housing in Carlsbad. Teachers were desperately needed to handle all of the new students moving into the area, but it was a catch-22. In reality, 2020 and the downturn in the oil industry has actually been good for my community. Just last night, the school district presented their annual report on student homelessness, and ironically, it has gone down. Because the market has slowed, housing prices have dropped, and more families have found housing. This tells me that oil companies and politicians have a very unrealistic view of what an economically healthy community looks like. The insane amount of money being made in the Permian is in no way sustaining the communities within the Permian. It is actually strangling them. Some people that make a decent living in oil and gas may disagree with this assessment of how the industry hurts communities, but even for those people, the economic gains come at a cost. While there are barely any, if any, federally or state-funded health studies in the Permian, we all know that production comes with health risk at every turn. From the carcinogenic VOCs that are emitted along with the methane that warms our planet, to the radioactive produced water that is dumped and spilled everywhere in the Permian, to the daily fatal car wrecks that take place on oil highways, and the dangerous nature of the work in the oil industry, workers and their families are at constant risk, whether they realize it or not. In fact, the reason I am so involved with issues of climate justice is because at 28, I already know more people that have battled cancer than my 80-year-old grandmother does. All of these people live in Carlsbad. They are young and they are dealing with rare and aggressive cancers. It simply isn't normal, and I don't need a study to confirm that for me. The reality is clear. I am all for eliminating subsidies because I am sick of reading in my local paper about massive oil companies giving what is ultimately minuscule donations to my community's schools and charities in order to keep the public pacified so that they can continue to suck us dry. It is nauseating and no more than a PR campaign. Eliminating subsidies would actually force these companies to systemically give back to the communities that they bring systemic issues to. I admire the bold leadership of the Oversight Environmental Subcommittee and their willingness to call out this toxic cycle. We must take bold action to save our planet, and we must also take bold action in order to support communities that are ravaged by the oil industry. I am beyond grateful to know that we have such amazing leaders advocating on our behalf. And I want you to know that you have the citizens of the Permian behind you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee, very much. Appreciate it. And I think from New Mexico now we're gonna go a little bit further east to Texas. When I introduce now John Beard. John is the executive director of and founder of the Port Arthur Community Action Network. John, how you doing?
I'm fine. How are you this evening?
Good, good. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Port Arthur area.
Good. Well, first of all, let me say good afternoon to everybody. I'm honored and happy to be able to be here to bring you a little bit of the slice of life of what's going on in Port Arthur and how these subsidies that are given to the petrochemical industry, the oil and gas industry, affect our city and affect Texas in general. As you said, I'm from Port Arthur, Texas, a coastal community about 100 miles due east of Houston. And we sit at what I consider to be the forefront of environmental racism, environmental injustice, and also climate change. Some of you probably heard of Hurricane Harvey. Well, Hurricane Harvey dumped in the Port Arthur area the most rainfall that's ever been recorded in these United States, 60.58 inches, flooded virtually all of the entire city of Port Arthur, some places in several feet high. The water was so high that in some areas, you could step off the boat onto the roof of homes. And that was very devastating. In the past 15 years, we've been hit by 5 major hurricanes and storms. So we know the effects of climate change and what it's doing. We are also home to some of the largest petrochemical refining facilities in the country. We are home to 3 LNG facilities and numerous pipelines that crisscross our community almost like a spider web. So we see on a very large scale and daily basis the effect of what these subsidies have. And we consider those subsidies to be a form of corporate welfare. So we ask ourselves, what purpose do those subsidies have? They make it easy for multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations to continue to do business who have no shortage of money. But yet the communities in which they're housed see all sorts of inadequacies and inequities. My home city needs repairs in virtually every conceivable way in terms of infrastructure, in terms of water lines, sewer lines, in terms of streets. We need close to $500 million to make those improvements. But we can't get that money because to get these companies to come in, subsidies are given, incentives are given to reduce their taxable burden, and the amount of money that's settled upon by local governments, and I must say that I understand this because I'm a former city councilman, those incentives that are given simply don't allow us to have sufficient money to operate and to do our business and to make these changes. Or as it was said earlier, they basically starve you to death because you simply can't get enough money. Now even the state of Texas has gotten involved. But I agree with the administration. I applaud the administration and the efforts of Representative Khanna and others and Ilhan to get rid of those subsidies. It's no longer necessary. Why should we welfare subsidize or subsidize in any form or fashion an industry that makes billions of dollars and pollutes us at the same time? That pollution is virtually death to my community, and here's how. Port Arthur has twice the state and national average for heart, lung, kidney, and respiratory diseases. And that is in large part because of the pollution. We are in virtually a borderline non-attainment status in terms of the air quality we have there. You have senior citizens that can't move around in their homes without oxygen, and you have little 3-year-old children and toddlers that are taking breathing treatments and on nebulizers. That's not good. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for the health of our people. And it's simply not good to subsidize or continue to subsidize the poisoning of an entire community, nation, and world by the use of fossil fuels and subsidizing their use. So in closing, I'd like to say that I applaud the administration and the efforts of all others to change this, because we sit at the forefront of climate change. We sit at the forefront of all of the effects environmentally and health-wise that these subsidies are bringing to us, and they are not good. We have to transition and move away from fossil fuels, and the first step is ending those subsidies and finding a new, better, greener, and cleaner way of life that will allow us to live, move, breathe, and enjoy the benefits of living in this country that we should have. So once again, thank you for the opportunity, and let's make a move toward getting rid of those subsidies and ending fossil fuels' stranglehold on our nation.
Thank you, John Beard. That's why we're here today, right? We're calling on folks to watch the hearing tomorrow, to call their members of Congress, let them know that they need to endorse both the End Welfare for Polluters Act that Representative Omar introduced, as well as, co-sign the recommendations that will be coming out of the hearing tomorrow. So thank you so much for telling us what's going on down in Port Arthur. I really appreciate it, and so do the rest of the folks watching.
Thank you.
And so let me now turn it over to Jasmine Butler. Jasmine is a regional recruitment coordinator for the PowerShift Network. So Jasmine, tell us a little bit about the PowerShift Network and what you guys are doing to try to end fossil fuel subsidies.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And it's, great to follow up behind all the amazing things that, John Beard and Kaylee and everyone mentioned. So I'm here on behalf of the PowerShift Network, but also more specifically to talk a bit, following up with Kaylee about what these oil companies are doing in our communities. So the PowerShift Network is a collective of youth climate justice organizations across the country. And so, as a recruitment coordinator, I've spent the last few months recruiting Southeast youth who have this passion for climate justice and need somewhere and need organizing homes to kind of make those moves. They see, our government making promises to move away from oil and move towards renewable energy, but at the same time, our government again is still subsidizing oil companies. And the youth, they have the organizing energy and they're passionate and they want a better green future for our nation, but the government's words are not backing up, its actions. But more specifically, I have a really personal story with the oil companies. So back home, I'm born and raised in Memphis. That's really, really important to me and the community there. But we're currently battling Valero and Plains All America, who have proposed the Byhalia Connection Pipeline to run directly through Westwood, Memphis, which is a historically Black neighborhood and low-income neighborhood. So, they specifically and explicitly stated that they chose this path because they believe that it is the path of least resistance. The more direct, path for this connection pipeline would actually go through a different neighborhood on a different type of side of town that is much more affluent and that they knew would mount a much bigger resistance to their efforts. But instead, they chose Westwood because they knew that that would be easier for them to do. So, for us and for residents there have now been this grassroots effort that's mounted. There's now a group called Memphis Community Against the Pipeline that's doing everything in their power to support homeowners to make sure that these two companies can't buy out and force these homeowners out of their homes so that they can get their land to finish their connection pipeline. There's already been a spill. In January of 2020, Valero had a spill that leaked 800 gallons of crude oil and 10 pounds of benzene. This is in January 2020 near the proposed site for the pipeline that hasn't even been finished yet. So as you can see, these oil companies are already harming our communities and they know exactly what they're doing. And so you can imagine the confusion of community members when our government says that we're supposed to be moving towards renewable energy and away from oil, yet continually putting money and supporting these companies who know the harm that they're doing in our communities. So, like I said, people are excited and people are organizing and people love the promise and of the fact that the government says that they want to move away from these harmful companies who, they aren't just just getting money from our governments, they're actively harming our communities. And so this, the amazing, bills that Representative Omar and Khanna have brought up are exciting, especially for those of us who, oil isn't a distant issue for us. It's in our backyards. It's really one of the biggest threats and, fears right now in Memphis is our aquifer. Oil companies, they spill. It happens often. It has already happened in our hometown, and our water supply for the entire city in the region is being threatened by that. So I just, I guess, like I said, I'm here to represent the Powership Network, but I think what's most important in these situations is for, everyone tuning into the hearing tomorrow to know that oil just isn't, a distant issue or an offshore issue. It's absolutely an issue here for our communities now. And people are afraid. People know, like I said, this corporation, they chose this path because they thought that it would be easy. They thought that this community was someone they could bulldoze over, and they have the government's money to do so. So I'm really excited about the bills that have been proposed tomorrow, and I'm excited to tune into the hearing. And again, youth are excited to organize against this, but they want our government to actually be behind them and actually create the green future that the youth of this nation deserve. So thank you again to Reps Omar and the others who proposed these bills, and to everyone tuning in tomorrow. Our representative, Steve Cohen, has been, by our side this entire time and has been supportive as possible. And so I'm excited to see others do the same and follow suit. Thanks again, Paco.
Thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, it's really important, I think, to note, I think John hit on it too, right? That, it's usually communities of color, communities that are less affluent, that are the ones that have to deal with this stuff, right? And it's not just in Tennessee, it's, I think, all over the country, right? In Texas and New Mexico, and even in California, right? If you look at the port of Long Beach, right? So much pollution there, kids with asthma and everything else. So, it's part of it is on us, right? We have champions inside Congress, but it's also about the outside, right? It's on us and the youth-led movements and all the other movements that are coming together around this to really push our members of Congress to sign on to these bills and to take action on these issues. So thank you so much, Jasmine. Really appreciate it. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Janet Redman. Janet is the Greenpeace USA climate campaigner that deals with a lot of these issues, including ending fossil fuel subsidies. Greenpeace is a great friend to many of the groups that are represented here, as well as to our revolution. We've been doing some work on this together for a little bit now. So Janet, take it away.
Thanks so much, Paco. It's great to be with you, and it's great to be with everybody here. Really, really grateful for being able to join this slate of incredible speakers who know this issue inside and out from their lived experience. And that perspective is the most important perspective for all of us to understand and to hold when we think about this issue. Greenpeace is an organization of about 3 million supporters in the United States, and we have members across the world in Greenpeace in 27 countries. And in every office, we're fighting fossil fuels around the world. So this is totally a community issue. It's a national issue, and it's a global issue too. And the reason we're so adamant about removing fossil fuel subsidies, we know this is a first step. It's not the whole piece, but it's the first most important step, because right now we know there's a problem with climate change, but we're actively digging the hole deeper by throwing money at this industry. And the rule we all know is when you find yourself in a hole, the first step is to stop digging. So let's stop giving these companies billions, tens of billions of dollars of our tax money every single year. Really, this is about climate safety, but it's also about racial justice and equity, as all these speakers have mentioned already on the table, and it's about democracy. So, we know in the climate science, right? We know we're in the midst of a climate crisis, an existential crisis. We've got less than 10 years now to reduce global emissions by half. And instead of cutting our emissions, we're actually throwing billions of dollars into more production, as the speakers have talked about. We're expanding pipelines. We're expanding export terminals. We're going in the wrong direction right now. We're looking to double our oil and gas. And as Zanagee mentioned, a lot of that is only viable because the U.S. government is handing our cash over to fossil fuel CEOs. But it's not just a climate problem, obviously. We know it's a racial justice problem. 1 in 5 premature deaths around the world is because of fossil fuel-related air pollution. So that's like 20% of the premature deaths in the world is because of this pollution that the fossil fuel industry is pumping into our atmosphere. And we're paying them to do it functionally. So we got to cut off that line of cash. And of course, we know that those impacts are not evenly distributed, right? It's Black, it's Indigenous, it's brown folks, it's it's communities of color that are most disproportionately impacted. And that kind of economic and political marginalization also shows up in the way that the fossil fuel industry undermines our democracy. They've been, as folks have mentioned, they've known about the climate crisis for decades. First they denied the science, then they started doing false advertising to undermine the science. Now they're saying we're totally on board, no problem, while they're also financing things like anti-protest bills. So when people do show up to try to assert their rights not to have a pipeline go through their backyard, they're getting them arrested for it. So this is the kind of industry that's totally okay with financing climate deniers in Congress. And they're also totally okay with financing anti-democracy politicians and policies. These are not the kinds of people we should be handing our tax dollars over to. We are super excited about the End Polluter Welfare Act, and we are encouraging our members to call their senators and representatives to co-sponsor this act, in part because it's the most comprehensive piece of legislation right now to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. And again, those subsidies are things like the tax breaks those industries get, but it's all kinds of stuff. So Zanagee mentioned the BP oil spill. Right now, BP gets a write-off for cleaning up that oil spill. Like, that's tax deductible right now. But they also get cheap access to our land. They also get cheap access to our roads. We're basically giving them all kinds of handouts across the spectrum in the US economy right now. And until we say no more, we're not going to be able to transition off of fossil fuels. It's really about setting up that next economy that we know we need so that the economy is healthy, but so our communities are healthy and so the climate's healthy. This is so critical right now because, as folks have mentioned, we're in the midst of talking about what the infrastructure package will look like, what the recovery is going to look like. We're going to spend trillions of dollars on recovery in the US, and we can either spend it propping up the old system, or we can spend it moving to the new system that takes care of people and the planet. You'll probably hear, folks on the call will probably hear, representatives from the American Petroleum Institute, from some of the oil and gas companies saying, like, please don't take our handouts away. If you do, we're going to lose jobs. If you do, it's going to crash the economy. But let's just look at what happened last year in one of the relief packages. These oil and gas CEOs were able to access billions of dollars. And what did they do? They still laid off over 100,000 people last year in the oil and gas sector and busted communities that depend on this part of the economy. So what we need now is that transition, that managed transition away from oil and gas. It has to start by digging ourselves deeper into this hole. Stop the handouts, stop the taxpayer handouts, and then let's put in place a real transition. So I'm excited about joining the hearing tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern time. I hope you all will as well. Please reach out to your representatives, reach out to your senators, ask them to please co-sponsor the End Polluter Welfare Act. That's absolutely a basic action. If you are a climate leader, you have to support this bill. We have to cut off the lifeline, the public dollar lifeline to the fossil fuel industry, so they can stop tanking the planet, stop tanking our communities, and stop trashing our future. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Janet. I really appreciate it. We are at the end of our call here. Again, I just want to give a shout out to all the groups that are working on this issue, that have helped us distribute this video: Oil Change US, Zero Hour, Public Citizen, Friends of the Earth, Food and Water Watch, Greenpeace, of course, Sunrise Movement, PDA. Anyway, there's many, many others, including some of the folks on this call. So really appreciate it. And just don't forget, right? We have to end fossil fuel subsidies. We have to make sure we keep, fossil fuels in the ground. And we can start by, supporting our champions in Congress, right? We have Representative Khanna holding this hearing. We had Representative Omar introduce the End Polluter Welfare Act. We have to grow that team inside of Congress, but we also have to do our part outside, right? Calling on them, pressuring them to make sure that this gets included in the next infrastructure bill. We've got really the best shot at it that we've had in a long time because of the budget reconciliation process. So call your members of Congress, let them know that this needs to be part of the infrastructure bill. Tell them to support both the End Polluter Welfare Act as well as the recommendations that will be coming out of the hearing tomorrow. And with that, I want to thank all our guests tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. and look forward to winning this alongside all of you. It's going to take all of us to get it done, but I think, as we've heard, people are ready to get it done. So let's get out there and push our members of Congress. We're going to have to push in the Senate as well, but it starts in the House, and it starts tomorrow at 10 a.m. Don't forget to watch the hearing. It'll be live streamed on the Oversight Committee's YouTube page. You can share it and watch it from there, comment on it, and let's make sure that we get this into the next infrastructure bill. So thank you all very much for joining us tonight, and look forward to seeing you out in the streets pushing for this. Take care, guys.